Hey there, my name is Liz Wright, and today I'm going to be presenting to you for Psychology Day 2021 about careers in psychology. So if you don't know, Psychology Day is a presentation of the Northwest Vista College faculty. Northwest Vista College is located in San Antonio, Texas. And as I said, my name is Liz Wright, and I am a psychology faculty member at NBC. So today we are going to be talking about careers in psychology. So what sorts of things can one do with a psychology degree, and how do we go about doing those things? So one of the things that we want to take a look at first are what are the skills that are acquired by getting a psychology degree or by studying psychology. So we can think about the cognitive skills that we gain, such as creativity, information management, strategies for learning new things on one's own, which is really one of the ultimate goals of receiving an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree, is to be able to figure out how to find information and how to evaluate that information in terms of its validity. Another thing that we work on are communication skills, so active listening as opposed to passive listening, active listening as opposed to waiting for our turn to speak, which we probably know some people that do that. We also work on public speaking when we are capable of doing that in our classes. We gain personal skills such as conscientiousness and integrity. We learn about ethics and research and ethics in different areas of psychology, and hopefully apply those ethical learnings. We learn about social skills such as collaboration and leadership. We learn about technology use, such as using software and being flexible in using that new software. So a lot of students have a question of what do all of the letters or the alphabet soup stand for in terms of getting different college degrees. So at Northwest Vista, we offer Associates of Arts, AA, and Associates of Sciences, AS. At your four-year institution, they may offer a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. There's a couple other degrees that may be offered as well, such as a Bachelor's in Education. Your graduate programs will offer a Master of Arts, a Master's in Education, or a Master's of Science. Typically, the science degrees are going to include more science and math courses, whereas the arts degrees are going to require fewer math and science courses. We can also look at the potential to get a doctorate, a Ph.D., a Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology, and the newer degree, which is the PsyD, which is the actual doctorate in psychology. Typically, PsyD programs focus more on actually preparing people to be clinicians and to work in the field in terms of clinical psychology and also assessment. But they both the PhD and a PsyD program will require you to take statistics and research methods courses, as well as application type courses. Then we can also talk about the potential for getting an MD. This is your medical doctor. This is a person who can prescribe medication. So for students who are interested in becoming psychiatrists, then the MD would be the route that you would want to take. Some schools actually offer a PhD, MD collaborative program where when students graduate, they will receive both the PhD and the MD. And if you're interested in learning more about those types of programs and where they're located, just Google PhD, MD psychology, and you'll be able to find multiple programs. So let's talk about, Northwest Vista offers associate's degrees. So let's talk about what are some of the jobs locally for us that a student might be able to apply for once they've finished their associate's degree. So I went on our friend Google, and found multiple jobs that one could apply for with an associate's degree. So lots of students are always asking me, well, do I have to get a bachelor's degree? Can I just work with an associate's degree? And so these are some of the things that we can do with an associate's degree in psychology. So we can work as a resident advocate in a women's shelter. We can work as a behavioral health technician in an emergency center, registration coordinator at a hospital, intake specialist for specific programs, working with juveniles, working in the education system. There were a couple jobs for health insurance companies where you could work as a case coordinator. There was a manager for a homeless shelter position that was available, and then there was a shift supervisor position for the detention center. So lots of different things that one can do with an associate's degree in psychology. Now, if we wanted to move on and get a bachelor's degree, there were other options available in terms of local jobs as well. So we could work as a victim services manager with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, work as an entry-level behavioral technician, typically in a hospital or inpatient type setting. We could be a student advisor for undergraduates, so other folks who are receiving their associate's degrees or their bachelor's degree. Work as a technician at the San Antonio or South Texas Behavioral Health Center. We could be a parent educator, teaching parents about parenting strategies. We can also work as a career transition specialist, helping people to learn about what career opportunities are available to them and how to go about getting those jobs. So those are the jobs that, or some potential jobs, I should say, that one could get with an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree here in San Antonio. A lot of students enter into psychology and studying psychology because it interests them, not specifically because they want to become a certain thing, but just they enjoy the classes. And so they think, well, I'll study this and see where it takes me. I will say that that was my personal experience. I started school as a education major. I was going to teach high school French and ended up taking general psychology and enjoying it. Took another psychology class because it fit with our core curriculum and I enjoyed that. So I continued taking psychology classes, not really having any idea of what I would end up doing with them. So one thing we want to keep in mind is that for many people, that career journey is not going to be linear. It's not going to be, I know I want to get to here, so this is my process. A lot of times it looks more kind of like this, right? So we may find that we think we want to do a certain thing, and then we get into the training program to do that certain thing, and we realize, not so much, this really isn't what I'm into. But we may find something else along the way that we're more interested in. For me, I started my master's program in clinical psychology because that was what was available to me at the time and location-wise. And by the end of my program, I had decided that I really probably did not want to spend the rest of my life being a therapist, being a clinician, but I was offered the opportunity to have a teaching assistantship. And so I took the teaching assistantship because it paid my tuition and it paid a stipend as well. And once I started teaching, once I got into the classroom, started working with students, that's really when I realized, like, okay, this is what I want to do. Once I graduated with my master's degree, I did work in clinical with children and families. And a lot of times in terms of jobs and what I learned in the places that I went, I would hear from a friend like, oh, so-and-so is looking for a psychologist to work with kids in early intervention. And so my thought was like, that sounds pretty cool. So early intervention is like our ECI in Texas. It works with children and families, children between the ages of 0 and 3. And helps those families to navigate the different services that are available to them, including occupational therapy, physical therapy, things like that. So I ended up doing that for a while. I worked as a trauma therapist for children. I worked specifically with kids with ADD, PTSD, and autism. And so when I went to apply for teaching positions, one of the things that I was told is because of all of this broad experience I had, that I would be a great fit for the position I was applying for because I had all this experience in learning and teaching about lifespan, which is one of the classes that they really wanted me to teach. So a lot of times people kind of say, like, well, you need to have a plan, you need to have a course of action. And sometimes the plan can be great, and sometimes it really works out well for us. But there's going to be other times where, as I said, that career path isn't going to be so linear. That career path maybe isn't going to show up for us until later on. And that's when we realize, like, wow, I really love cognitive psychology, and that's what I want to study. I really love working with pet therapy and helping clients with, my dog or something like that. So another thing that we can do that we offer at NVC is it's great to have a mentor. It's great to have someone who's been through this process before, who can maybe give us some outside ideas of, like, well, have you tried this? Have you checked this out? So NVC does offer a mentorship program, and I'm going to put the link for students to check that out and sign up for a mentor at NVC. And there's a specific process you're going to go through. So the mentor is going to meet with you. You're going to kind of fill out a strategy for what you want to do with your mentorship time. And then participating in that mentorship is going to go onto your academic resume. And when we start to apply for our bachelor's program, when we start to apply for our graduate programs, that's another thing that will look really good on our applications. And also, like I said, it can help us to clarify, what do we want to do, what maybe we don't want to do. And that's a lot of times what people end up figuring out how to, or what they want to do. One of the ways they figure it out is they figure out what they don't want to do. So they get into a certain position and they realize, this is not what I want to do. So I can kind of remove that from the list of possibilities and move on to the list of possible things that I still have. So one of the questions that students ask me a lot is, does it matter where I get my bachelor's degree from? And, there's a couple of different answers to that. If you have a specific thing that you want to study, so you want to study cognitive psychology, you want to study animal behavior, one of the things I would suggest is to try to find a faculty member who does research in the specific area that you're interested in, and try to apply to a bachelor's program that that faculty member works in. But if you don't have a specific area in mind, if you just think, psychology is cool, I'm not really sure what I want to do with it, then my best suggestion would be to go to a school that offers a bachelor's program that is available to you and that's affordable for you. We don't want to be spending ridiculous amounts of money and getting all these loans for a bachelor's program when we're not even sure what exactly they're going to do with that. So one of the other questions I hear often is, do I get a BA? Do I get a BS? So remember, the difference between the BA and the BS really focuses on the number of science and math courses. So if you want to go into research, so if you want to be a social psychologist and do research on identity development, then I would suggest that you get the BS as opposed to the BA. If you want to go into clinical psychology, if you want to become a counselor, then BA or a BS would be fine, either one. I do always suggest that students get the BS though, if it's available, simply because it does have those higher number of science and math courses, and you will be required in graduate school to take at least one, if not more, research methods and statistics courses. So you want to be ready for that. And a lot of times those extra science courses, those extra math courses that you're taking for the BS also fit with your core requirements. So again, if you're unsure of what you want to do, which is many of our students, then as I said, keep going to school, keep going wherever you can go. If they offer a BS, then I do suggest going for the BS, but if they only offer a BA, then work on getting your Bachelor of Arts. So a lot of students also ask, how do I pay for this? I definitely want to suggest loans should be your last option. So what are some other options? Obviously scholarships, right? So you literally want to apply for all of the scholarships. And as you're applying for a scholarship, your mindset should be like, I really want this scholarship. This is the only scholarship that I'm applying for. It's really important that I get this. So if you keep that mindset with each of the applications that you're putting in, it demonstrates usually more conscientiousness to the committee who's looking at your application, as opposed to if you send off the same one paragraph letter to every single application, then that doesn't really indicate a high level of conscientiousness to the people who are reading your scholarship letters. There's scholarships available online, so make sure that you're checking for those, but also be kind of wary. There's some scholarships that basically say, if you send us $25, we'll put you in a pool of people to get scholarships. It's kind of like playing the lottery. Like, everybody pays $25 and then we pick two names and those two people get scholarships out of the $25 that everyone sent. So let's avoid doing that. That's not a good strategy. Talk to your school financial aid office. They may have opportunities that you're not aware of. They may have opportunities such as being like a reader grader if you're in a bachelor's program, which is a work position that also gives you experience working with faculty, and then it's also paid. We can also think about, like I just said, look for jobs at your school. Sometimes if you're an employee of the school that you are going to, you can actually get free tuition. So that might be something to think about. Sometimes with especially full-time positions, you can get free tuition. So that's one way to think about, how can I get my tuition paid for? Well, I can work full-time at the college and have my tuition paid for. You want to talk to your faculty. We, every once in a while, get emails from different organizations that have scholarships available. So your faculty may have some things to give you suggestions on in terms of scholarship opportunities. Definitely belong to honor societies and associations. For example, the American Psychological Association has a student membership. Many of the professional organizations have a student membership, and some of those also have scholarship opportunities specifically for students who are working on their associate's degrees or on their bachelor's degrees. So not only does being in an honor society look good on our resume, but also it may open us up to other scholarship opportunities. Another scholarship opportunity that you may not think about is sometimes if you have a parent or legal guardian who works for a specific company, that specific company may offer scholarships. So talk to your parents, talk to your guardians about that and see if they know of any scholarships, or if they can talk to their people at work who know of scholarships as well. Then when we're talking about graduate school, one of the benefits of working from home is the bundle. Sorry about that. So when you're thinking about graduate school options, look at what schools offer scholarships and or assistantships. So those can help you to defer the cost of tuition. You also want to think about if you do end up getting loans, try to pay them off as you're in school, and that can help to defray the cost over time. And as we talked about, some workplaces will pay for your education. So if you're looking at jobs, ask about tuition reimbursement options. I know there's some places in San Antonio, for example, USAA has a fantastic tuition reimbursement program. So that might be something for you to look into as you're looking at jobs. So let's talk about some more frequently asked questions or frequently questioned options. So a lot of students ask about clinical psychology. They'll come into my classes and they'll say that they want to be a therapist. And many times when I ask students about their educational goals, they'll say that they want to get the PhD so that they can become a therapist. A couple things we want to keep in mind about that. There are, I don't want to say very few, but there are small numbers of PhD opportunities within each school. Usually each school will take between 3 and 8 new students per year. And if you think of the number of students in just my classes who say that they want to get the PhD, the number of options is the number of opportunities, and the number of students who are interested in those opportunities don't match. So we want to be thinking about what is academically necessary for us to reach the career goal that we want to reach. One thing to keep in mind is, what does a therapist actually do? And a lot of times students will tell me that they want to be a therapist because people tell them that they give good advice. And something to keep in mind is that really the role of a therapist is to help a client to come to a decision about what they want to do with their own personal goals. So what goals does the client want to set? So it's not that the therapist comes in and says, okay, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. But instead, we work with the client to figure out what goals do they want to reach, and then what are some of the strategies that they can use to reach those goals. A lot of times, having just someone to listen to what we're working on and what goals or what activities haven't worked towards the goals and then having someone give us feedback and say, well, you could try this, you could try that. Those are the things that a therapist is going to be able to do. We can also talk about how therapists will help us to set behavioral goals. So for example, increasing the amount of time spent out with other people in order to decrease depression symptoms, increase the amount of time spent outdoors exercising in order to decrease depression symptoms. So again, being a therapist isn't all about you sitting there and telling another person what to do or how to do it, but it's really about listening. That's the biggest thing, is listening and helping the client feel heard, helping the client feel that they are capable of completing their goals, and helping them to work towards their goals as necessary. So if we want to do that, if we want to spend our week, so think about your week as a 40-hour work week, right? If we want to spend our week seeing clients all day, every day, then in order to do that, we only need a master's degree in the state of Texas. So with an MA, a Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology, or an MED, which would typically be a Master of Education in Counseling, these are different programs. These are usually offered in different parts of the college. Both of those can lead to licensure, where the person can become a licensed therapist. They can open their own practice. So if that's your ultimate goal, then the master's degree can be sufficient for that. Now, if your ultimate goal is to supervise other clinicians, to be the person who is a supervisor for a new master's level clinician as they're getting their supervised hours before licensure, then you would want to get the PhD or the PsyD. So we can also, as a person with a PhD or a PsyD, we can have independent practice as well. So you can get licensed and you can open up your own office. Something to keep in mind, though, is kind of a cost-benefit analysis. So let's think about how much money we spent to get our master's degree, how much money we would spend to get our PhD, and then what are we going to be getting paid hourly to see our clients. One example would be most insurance companies typically will reimburse at $60 an hour. And if that's the case, they're more likely to want to work with a master's level clinician who is billing $60 an hour than a PhD level clinician who is billing at $120 an hour. Now, if you're going to be working with people who are paying out of pocket as opposed to with insurance, then you can charge whatever you want to, whatever, whatever the amount of money that your clients can pay, right? But if you're using insurance, keep in mind that insurance does not want to pay that $120 to the PhD. They want to pay the $60 to the master's level clinician. They typically will pay a PhD maybe for an assessment. So if you're interested in doing assessments for clients who are trying to decide if their child has ADD or not, and whether or not they should seek out a psychiatrist for medication to help with their child's ADD, then if that's what you're interested in doing, then the PhD would be beneficial, and you can bill for assessment to insurance companies. But just keep in mind that you're going to end up doing assessments a lot, and that's going to be your day. So the question really becomes, like, what do you want your day to be? Do you want to see 5 or 6 clients per day? Because I will tell you right now, probably seeing 8 clients per day, like thinking of the 40-hour work week, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, probably not going to happen. You're going to have clients who are going to cancel. You're going to have clients who can only be seen in the evening after work. You're going to be having clients that are children. They're going to be in school until 4:30, and so you can't see them until later in the day. And many times the clinician schedule is very kind of all over the place, simply because of the fact that we have to be available when our clients are available, and not many of our clients are going to be available when they're supposed to be at work, which is what, a lot of students think, like, I'll work 9 to 5. I'm like, well, but who can come to counseling between 9 and 5, right? So keep those things in mind as you're trying to decide if you're interested in going into clinical psychology. What should I be shooting for? Should I be shooting for a master's degree? Should I be shooting for a PhD? And what is the population or group of people that I feel most comfortable or want to work with? You can also think about what is maybe the population I don't want to work with. So if someone thinks like, oh, I don't think I could work with that group, okay, then that's off of your list, as we said before. Whereas you may find that you really enjoy working with a specific population. We can also talk about school psychology, another large area within psychology itself. Clinical psychology is one of the larger areas. School psychology is another area that's pretty large. And I will tell you that across the country, we have a low number of LSSPs, or licensed specialists in school psychology, and they are important and necessary. So if you're thinking, I'd like to maybe work with kids, I'd like to work in a school system, but I'm not quite sure how, then you might want to look into school psychology. So we can talk about the difference between a school psychologist, an LSSP, and a school counselor. So a school psychologist, a person with their MA, is called a licensed specialist in school psychology, or LSSP. And those folks typically work with a school district, not just within one particular school, but work within an entire district. And they are spending their days doing assessments. And we'll actually look at a job description in a minute, but they're doing assessments for students who might have learning challenges. So for example, both my children have autism. Both of them were assessed by our district's LSSP to see what the most useful accommodations for my kids might be. So if a child has attention deficit disorder, if a child has oppositional defiance disorder, then the LSSP is going to assess the child and help the family and the school figure out what are some strategies to work with this child, these accommodations that might help the child be more successful in school. One thing to keep in mind is that in the state of Texas, only people with their PhDs in school psychology can call themselves school psychologists. So if you are getting the master's degree in school psychology, then you are an LSSP. If you're getting the PhD in school psychology, then you can call yourself a school psychologist. Now, a lot of students also want to be guidance counselors or school counselors, those folks that are in the individual school, stay in the individual school, and maybe run groups with the students in the school, or they do individual counseling sometimes with the students in the school. Those would be your school counselor. So let's talk about the strategy or how we're going to go about getting there to be a school counselor. When I moved to Texas, I thought this was a really interesting process because this is a different process than it was where I was from. And I actually talked to our school counselors at my children's elementary school just to see, like, how does this work? So you start off with a Bachelor of Arts in Education, and usually you have to teach for 2 years before you can then enroll in a master's program. So you're going to have your teacher certificate. So you finish the bachelor's program, you take the teacher's test, you become a teacher, you teach for 2 years, and then you can enroll in the master's program in school counseling. And then once you finish that, then you take another test and you become the professional school the professional school counselor with a certificate, and you can then work as a school counselor. So the differences obviously between the two of those, school psychologists and LSSP are going to be working within the district, whereas the school counselor is going to be working within the specific school with a specific set of students. So let's take a look at the LSSP job description. So as I said, this is specifically for San Antonio. So we can see that they are having knowledge and skill in assessment, determining special education eligibility, talking about academic and behavioral interventions for students, applying the state and legal frameworks for special education, ensuring compliance with all facets of special education. So they're looking at problems and interventions with the school counselors, with parents, and they provide direct student behavioral support and track student progress towards their IEP goals. I know that our LSSP has gone to all of our meetings every year in order to figure out what are our next strategies. Did we reach the goals that we set last year? If not, how can we modify them for this year? If we did meet them, then what should be the goals for next year, especially in terms of behaviors relating to their special education, their disabilities. So, and then we can take a look at the school counselor job. Now, this is specifically a high school counselor job. And I know there's lots of stuff in here, and I tried to delete all of the things that I'm like, yeah, we know that would make sense. But there's just a lot of stuff going on in here. So, campus level comprehensive guidance plan, conducting individual and group counseling, assisting students in demonstrating self-confidence and reaching educational goals, conferring with students, parents, teachers as needed, individual academic parent conferences, sometimes placing student in appropriate instructional programs, and also helping students to build their schedule. So for example, when my 11-year-old moved from 5th grade to 6th grade, moving up to middle school, having to choose his classes, the counselors came into their classes and helped them to do that. Shares information concerning programs across the campus and throughout the district, such as alternative school and tech school, advising students in, especially for high school, advising students in their 4-year high school plan, looking at college things, providing college day and financial aid workshops. So basically a resource to the students in lots of different areas. So depending upon which level you're working at, elementary, middle, or high school, obviously you're going to have different requirements based upon what you're specifically working on. So as I said, this one is specifically for a high school school counselor or guidance counselor. Now, another thing that a lot of students talk to me about is wanting to go into forensic psychology. A lot of students have kind of a misconception of what forensic psychology is. So I really wanted to include it here because I did want to kind of help students work on those misunderstandings of what a forensic psychologist would actually do. So if you've watched Criminal Minds and thought to yourself, that's what I want to be. I want to be a behavior analyst for the FBI. Forensic psychology is not what you're looking at. Okay, so forensic psychology is really a combination of clinical psych and law. So forensic psychologists are going to use those clinical diagnostic skills and interview skills to assist clients who are typically going to be legal involved, and also assist lawyers and law enforcement groups with more effective strategies for legal defense, as well as change management strategies. So maybe helping a client to change their behaviors while in jail so that they can move towards not being in jail, or move towards work placement or something like that. So there's going to be a lot of assessment and treatment of seriously mentally ill forensic, for example, legal involved clients. Is it possible that a forensic psychologist might be asked to give help or information regarding the behavior of a serial offender? It is possible, but that is not, if you're going into forensic psychology, that's not what you're going into forensic psychology for, if that makes sense. Okay. So let's talk about graduate school. Graduate school is our master's level, our PhD level, our PsyD level, or our MD level. So what do you want to do to have a good looking application? So we're working through our bachelor's degree. What should we be doing to make sure, and our associate's degree, what should we be doing to make sure that we are going to have the most competitive applications for graduate school? We want to try to do an internship of some sort. So if you're interested in clinical, then you want to try to find an internship. Also, any sort of volunteer opportunities that relate to your potential job would fit in with this as well. If you're interested in research, you want to conduct research with a faculty member. You want to publish research with a faculty member. You want to present research with a faculty member at a conference. All of these things can help us to look better to in our application for graduate school. And even if you're going into clinical, doing these things can benefit you as well, even if it's not in a research area that you're particularly interested in. We want to do professional development and document it. You want to document everything. So if you volunteer for the Humane Society, you want to document that. You want to start keeping not just a resume, but an academic resume, and that's called a curriculum vitae or a CV. And the CV literally lists off all of the activities that you have done that might relate to potentially going to graduate school. And then once you're in graduate school, you're going to be listing off everything that you do, including, any sort of teaching assistantships or any sort of guest lecturing, anything that once you go into the job market will make you stand out from other applicants. So we do want to attend professional development. So if your school, your bachelor's level school offers conferences about psychology, then you want to attend those. If they offer volunteer opportunities, you want to attend those as well, as much as possible. Not saying like if you don't, you obviously won't get in. That's not the case. But you want to do as much as possible to set your application apart from other people's applications. So again, being a member of associations is beneficial as well. That also goes on your CV. So American Psychological Association, APS, SWAFA, which is the Southwestern Psychological Association, faculty and students from NVC attend and present at SWAFA typically annually. So you want to check out any sort of opportunities to attend, present at, those sorts of things. Honor societies, again, we already mentioned, can be really beneficial. And we can serve as a tutor or a reader grader at your bachelor's level institution. So some schools have psychology tutors, and some of these are paid positions, some of them are volunteer positions. So check into that because that will help you as well. That's another thing that goes on your CV to show people that you are invested in the field. We already talked about volunteer work, and volunteer work in your area of interest obviously is going to demonstrate commitment. And then you want to establish relationships with your faculty because you're going to need letters of recommendation from your faculty members. And if you haven't really spent a lot of time on campus, or you haven't spent a lot of time interacting with your faculty, either via email or come into office hours, and then you show up at the end of your junior year and say, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? The faculty member may be like, I don't even remember your name. That's not good. That's not going to help us. Okay. So we want to make sure that we are interacting and establishing relationships with our faculty members so that these will be the people who know us well enough to provide a recommendation for us when we do want to move on to the master's, the PhD, the PsyD, or the MD program. Okay. Some faculty are going to have requirements. So you have to have been in at least 2 of my classes in order for me to write a recommendation letter for you. If that's the case, we want to know that. So asking faculty, do you have requirements before you'll write a recommendation letter for a student is beneficial because you don't want to ask somebody who's just going to turn you down. So what are some strategies or tips for getting into graduate school? And you may be thinking like, I'm in my associate's program. I don't need to be worried about this yet. We still want to be thinking about it. You don't want to worry about it. You want to be thinking about it. And have it in the back of your head that, I need to be doing that list of things that we talked about before so that when it does come time for me to finish my bachelor's degree and move on, that my application will be a solid application. So just as you probably did for your bachelor's degree, make a list of where you want to go, where there are people studying what you want to study, and make a long list. Put them in order by which one fits your interests the best. So here's my top, my number 1, my number 2, my number 3. I remember, I think I did 10. And then you want to contact faculty that you'd be interested in working with at each of those institutions. Ask if they're going to have openings next year for graduate students. As we said before, sometimes a graduate program will only take between 3 and 5 new students per year. Sometimes they take even less than that, depends on how many people are graduating. Some schools will only take enough students that they can financially cover for the entire time that they're there, meaning that if you get in, they're going to pay your tuition for the whole entire year, for the whole entire time, because you're going to be serving as an assistant to somebody, right? But if they only have 3 available assistantships next year, then they should only be taking 3 new students next year. So we want to know, is that the case at the school that you're looking at? And if it is, then contact the faculty that you're interested in working with and ask them like, hey, are you actually going to have openings for the time that I'm interested in applying? If they're not, they may say, I don't, but so-and-so in X lab might have one, so you can contact that person. And we want to develop relationships with the faculty in the programs that you're applying to. And the reason for this is, so your bachelor's level faculty, we develop relationships with them so that they could be mentors to us, so that they could help us with our recommendation letters. But you want to develop relationships before you start your master's or PhD program with folks, because once we get down to sitting and looking at all the applications and trying to decide who we want to admit, that faculty member may be able to go, oh, I recognize this student's name. I've been emailing with this student. They've, we talk a lot about XYZ, and I think that they would be great for this program. So this person can become an advocate for you because of the fact that you've been interacting with them. Now, here's another thing. It might happen that your first year that you apply to graduate school, you don't get in anywhere. So rather than, putting your tail between your legs and saying, well, forget it, I'm not going to go into psychology, here's what you can do. Most colleges will allow you to take up to 3 courses without being actually enrolled in the program. And so you want to take a class and you want to do well in that class. You want to demonstrate to the faculty at that program that you can do the program, that you can hang, that you can get an A in the class. And because a lot of times your application, maybe your GRE scores, if that school requires them, or maybe your undergraduate GPA didn't look as good as they wanted it to, but what you're demonstrating to them is, I can do this. Look, I've been in this class and I've gotten an A in this class. Also, the faculty member that taught that class can now vouch for you as well and let the faculty know that, yes, this person is a good student and, came to class every day and always interacted and always had the readings done and things like that. So you want to take the class that first semester to demonstrate that you are capable of doing the work, and then reapply. And like I said, most schools will allow you to transfer in up to 3 classes. What that means is if you're not enrolled in the program, you can take 3 classes before they won't let you take anymore, because they won't let you transfer in those classes once you are enrolled. So we can keep trying and kind of keep going and going to the school, taking classes until we really can't anymore. Like I said, those 3 classes are usually what people will let you transfer in. So go to the school, take the class that you need to take for the graduate program that you're interested in, do well in it, reapply, and hopefully that demonstrates sufficiently to the faculty that you are capable of doing the graduate level work that they want you to do. Okay, so I feel like that was a lot of talking, a lot of stuff. So feel free to go back and review this, to pause, to take notes, all that fun stuff. If you have more questions, my email is up here. It's mwright70@alamo.edu. And if you are participating in Psychology Day as a student at Northwest Vista, and you're doing the form to indicate which of the talks you went to, you'll need a password. So my password is spooky, and I hope that everyone has a spooky weekend as Halloween is coming up. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and again, if you have more questions, please feel free to send me an email and we can chat about it.